Buddha said that an average person can experience moments of Nibbana, it's just that they're not true. Is that correct?
It means momentary, temporary letting go of attachment. The mind experiences freedom from attachment or emptiness, but it's temporary. So the word Ajahn uses tatanga vimutti. So vimutti means the liberated mind. Tatanga is like temporary, more momentary, as he mentioned earlier today. And it comes from, he said, when you're practicing meditation, your mind gathers in samadhi. There's enough continuous mindfulness, the mind becomes still in samadhi and then contemplates and lets go of all attachment at that time. It goes to a state of emptiness, but it's not sustained, so it comes back from that to normal ways of thinking and reacting to things. So it's not true Nibbana in that sense, permanent Nibbana, but it's a state of emptiness that is like a little Nibbana.
Nibbana just exists within each individual's mind. It's a state of mind which we can attain in individual's mind, or is it something out there that the mind taps into, which is separate from people?
It comes from within the mind itself.
So it's very different from like the Christian idea of heaven being a separate place.
It's difficult thing to describe successfully in words, because words tend to limit the concept and define it in ways that is not correct. But nevertheless, we still have to use language and words. So there is a sort of a vague relationship that they do even talk about Nibbana a bit sometimes like it's a state that exists, or it's a realm when the practitioner has freed their mind through insight of all attachments. The mind becomes empty of attachment. So it's empty of everything in the sense it doesn't grasp onto anything, body, physical or mental. So then it becomes as if without limit, without boundaries, without anything that it's sort of fixed on. That's Nibbana. So where you can't really say, well, it's a place, it's there, because the whole thing is it's without bounds, without limits. There's nothing you can tie it down with. But there is something. So it's a kind of a tricky concept to describe and sort of understand just with words. Nevertheless, that's what we have to do.
So if all human beings died, would Nibbana still exist, or would it disappear with the end of the human race?
Wouldn't disappear. Still be there. One factor that you didn't bring in then is that even if all the human beings were for some reason to disappear, the Buddhist cosmology talks about these other realms of existence, so what we call lower realms where beings are suffering in different states, ghost realms, hell realms. These are beings that you wouldn't normally see with the naked eye, have subtle bodies. And then there's the higher, what we call higher realms of heaven realms, realms of the gods and so on. And so even if all the human beings are gone, there'll still be some beings in these realms. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, one way to describe Nibbana is Dhamma Dhatu. In Thai it's Dhammata. Dhamma Dhatu, Dhamma means that which is, and Dhatu means like an element. So it's an element, in the sense it's something that just exists or just is. So that's all you can really say about it. It's that which is. The mind goes to that which is, or experiences that which is.
So we can't just say it's a state of mind.
You're right. You could say Nibbana is there already. It's already there, we don't see it, we don't experience it, but it's there. As you practice, through the development of wisdom, you're seeing delusion, you're seeing the suffering of attachment, the delusion of attachment, and little by little your mind is freeing itself from attachment, because you know this is cause of suffering, and this is delusion. So that process of little by little freeing one's mind of attachment brings the mind to more and more of an experience of emptiness of delusion, emptiness of self. So closer to realizing Nibbana, experiencing Nibbana. So it's as if the mind is little by little going towards emptiness, where it's opening up and recognizing or realizing Nibbana for what it is. And when that process is complete, well then the mind knows, oh, this is Nibbana. It was there all the time, you know, it's a truth that exists all the time, but normally we don't realize it, we haven't realized it, we haven't seen it.
So it's almost like a state that was there before the universe existed, just a totally state of emptiness.
This is getting tricky now. If you're going to talk about it in terms of like something with a physical boundary, or a boundary, a border, a limit, we could say, you know, just for the purpose of description, we can say, well, Nibbana is the most refined, limitless that there is. Coming step down from that is what we call the Brahma realms, the realms of those who have developed deep states of jhana, of samadhi. When they die, they're reborn in Brahma realms. They're considered heaven realms, the most refined, subtle realms, where one experiences the most subtle peace and happiness. But they're still finite realms. One dies from those realms and is reborn again. But it's a step down from Nibbana. A step down from that is the more material heaven realms, ordinary heaven realms we talk about. Step down from that is the human realm. And you know, the human realm encompasses the entire, what we call the universe, that scientists, astronomers talk about, planets, stars, all of that. We would call that the human realm. So the heaven realms, Brahma realms, are more refined, more subtle, higher than that. Nibbana, beyond that even. So
that's the highest realm.
Right, yeah, for descriptive purposes you could say like that.
This is probably a funny question, but could an arahant decide to come back into a lower realm? Like once they reach like Nibbana, they come back?
Can't. There's no more birth. There's no more sort of returning to the world or any of these other realms of existence. There's no more of that.
Ajahn, Buddha says that samsara has no end, but there'll be countless Buddhas in the future. So does that mean that all beings will be enlightened eventually? A new Buddha?
It's the time spans, the statistics of it, the concept of it all is so extreme, so expansive that it really gets to the point where you can't really know and go that far into the future. When the point comes when everyone will be enlightened, just the distance between one Buddha to the next in time span and what's gone between them is already fantastic, huge amounts of time. And then the comparison is one Buddha, the kind of effect on enlightening beings is, as a sort of a comparison, is like you compare the horns of a cow, which are 2, with all the hairs on its back, which is hundreds of thousands or millions. One Buddha is like enlightening that amount of beings, the 2 horns, and there's all these other beings, the hairs on the back, that are still unenlightened, are still there. The next Buddha comes along and 2 more horns. So that the time span, the whole sort of steps towards everyone becoming enlightened, you can have that wish and you can work towards it. It's going to be a long, long, long time. Already at present, the number of beings who have become Buddhas in the past, if you just go back indefinitely on and on and on into history, into time, is more than all the grains of sand in the Ganges River. You think how many countless, innumerable grains of sand there must be on the banks of the river, in the river. More than that. So, rather than going, expanding past, future, and all the present moment, practice in the here and now to achieve enlightenment here and now, because all these other things are just beyond concept. Everyone's gone quiet. Is that have we exhausted the deepest depths of doubt and uncertainty now? That's what poor Jay Lam. The question was asking Tenajan to explain a little bit more about the concept of watching the body, watching the mind, because often you hear teachers talking about practices watching the body and watching the mind. Some people teach just watching the body, some just watch the mind. And then Ajahn was explaining, well, of course, one is learning to know or watch or get to know the body, get to know the mind, both of them. But the obvious reality is that the mind is something very subtle, very fast. The movements, the changes of the mind, the subtleties of the mind, because you can't see it. It's something you have to know with the mind itself. And so practical reality is it's quite difficult to just watch the mind from moment to moment in your Dhamma practice. So then many practitioners will begin and base their practice around the body, which is coarser, more obvious to focus awareness on, to get to know or to watch. Particularly when one still has what we call sensual desire based around the body, the senses and the feelings of the body, and what you might call delighting or taking pleasure in this body is a very common experience for most people. We have a lot of attachment to the pleasures that come through the body, so that's a good place to start in your Dhamma practice, to observe the body and see how we are attached to always seeking pleasure through the senses and through the body, and take that as your starting point to contemplate, to see, say, the opposite, to see the unattractive side of the body, the unpleasant side of the body, and so on, to counter that delusion, counter that attachment. But it's not wrong to also observe the mind as well. But as you train yourself to observe the mind, you'll see, it's difficult, it's fast. To just see, say, the arising and passing away of mental phenomena, say a thought rising, passing away, moments of consciousness, is very, very refined and subtle practice. One can't just step into that practice, one has to train to the point when one can do that. So one uses the body first. And they say one who has already achieved some insight, say a basic level of insight, then they can focus on the mind directly and do that practice better or more successfully. But most people, as they begin practice, haven't achieved that level of insight perhaps. They need to work a lot with the body. And even the body, we say contemplate the body, it's not that you can spend your whole day walking around necessarily and doing your business and different things and always have a recollection, say, of the unattractive nature of the body, what we call the asuppa kammatthana, where you're just focusing on all the unattractive physical aspects of this body. To just do that and to do it often and also, say, continuously through a day already, that's quite difficult as well. So contemplation of the body begins right at the most basic, coarsest level, is just becoming aware of your posture. Sitting, standing, lying down, walking. Becoming aware of your posture, becoming aware of the actions, the movements of your body, and then bringing it in to investigate the body on a more deeper level, to see its component parts, to see the unattractive side and so on. So one works from the coarse through to the refined. And that's just practical reality for most people in their practice. They have to do it this way.
Someone like Ajahn teaches us, is this just purely like the duty he does out of compassion, sort of like a burden, or is it something that he get pity from teaching Dhamma?
So it's just natural for him, say, having practiced and developed knowledge, understanding of the path, insight into the path, for himself, his own practice, it's just natural that the mind is accompanied by a sense of metta, goodwill, compassion for other beings. And so when there's an appropriate occasion, then he can share his knowledge for their benefit. So if there are people who are interested, people with faith come forward, monks or lay people, then he can share his knowledge. That's just the way the mind is. If there's no need for that, if he's at the monastery, it's not like he's walking around thinking, what can I teach to people? It's just the mind is actually gone to a state of emptiness and peace. But when the need arises, the conditions are right, people come forward to looking for teachings, well then he can teach, and he can start, the mind starts to think of Dhamma to teach those people. But it's not like it's looking or needing that. It can just go to emptiness. If there's no one to teach, then the mind can just be peaceful on its own. As far as a duty, having the duty to teach, well, to say that, yeah, that's true, but that whole concept of a duty, well, that's conventional reality, isn't it? That's to say, well, there's a teacher, there's disciples, there's a monastery, there's an abbot, a teacher. These are the conventions of the world, and obviously that's part of our life as human beings. We use these conventions skillfully, we understand them. But that's as far as it goes. The mind itself is free from attachment to those conventions. It's not bound up in those conventions. It's free and peaceful on its own. But the peaceful mind naturally has metta, has compassion, kindness, goodwill, and a wish. If there are those beings with the need to hear the Dhamma, a wish to hear Dhamma, well, the mind comes forward to bring Dhamma for them. And the Buddha always said the giving of Dhamma is the highest kind of giving that a human being can perform. It's the highest, the best kind of giving. And so even then, even though the mind isn't needing that kind of giving, that kind of activity, in the process of giving, especially if one gives a Dhamma talk, one talks on to deeper levels of Dhamma, then in the course of doing that, well, piti and sukha can arise just as a natural result of giving Dhamma to higher levels. Piti and sukha can arise, one can have Dhamma piti, Dhamma joy arising in the giving of the Dhamma, and that's quite natural again. It's just a natural result of teaching Dhamma.